All right. Thank you all for joining me today. I'm very, very excited about this presentation. Maria and Leslie and I have talked about health certificate fiascos from a lot of different angles that they've talked with me about. And there's just a lot of knowledge that isn't there when it comes to documentation. And because a lot of hospitals don't do health certificates, they don't necessarily realize that what they're not documenting or how they're documenting their normal things is actually not accurate for legal reasons. So I'm very, very excited to have this talk today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Melissa Tompkins Lewis. I am the owner of South Coast Veterinary Management Solutions. I'm a full-time veterinary management consultant. I have a YouTube channel at South Coast Veterinary Manage. 263 is the code, or you can just look up South Coast Veterinary Management Solutions and you'll find me. All my webinars get uploaded and put on my channel, so you can go back and watch any that you haven't seen. You can like or subscribe to my channel so you can just get updates, but I always do email invitations ahead of time. So I don't call myself a YouTuber by any means. I'm not just going on there. I'm going to tell you first that I did it. So I'm very excited about this. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat because this could be a lot of conversation. They're going to answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. And if some of them have been answered already, then that will be great. If not, we'll go ahead and answer those questions at this time, or I'm sorry, at that time. But I will introduce Maria and Leslie. So I've known both of them for many years. We've done a lot of fun events together, conferences, all sorts of things. We were just in New Orleans at the VHMA conference last month, which was a great time. It was actually cooler than it normally is. So it was only like 90 and humidity of like 120. But it was actually better than the last time we went back in 2017. So it was a fun time. We have a great experience. I love these ladies. They're awesome managers and they both own their practices. So it's very exciting to have a manager owner on here who's not a veterinarian. So very excited about that. So I'm going to go ahead and just let you guys take it away and go ahead and get started with your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, I think Leslie and I have come to have a lot of things in common, especially this topic. So we like to commiserate, back each other up when it comes to health certificates, even though I would consider us both kind of experts. Leslie, I'm going to call it. I'm going to say I
Mhm.
think we're experts on this
You
subject,
are.
um, but we back each other up. I'll leave the floor to you.
All right. Well, as Maria said, we commiserate a lot about this topic, and one of the reasons why we wanted to present, we have presented together on just understanding the travel process, understanding, health certificates. We've really tried and encourage practices to embrace travel, and we're going to talk about why that's so important here. But we've also kind of decided too that you got to do it right, and so you can't just dabble. You either got to go all in or this is not going to go well. So, but this this process is important for every veterinary practice to understand, because what they're doing for patients that do end up traveling later makes a difference. And it's really important that everybody be in the know about what the current travel environment is and the regulations, because it's not just the USDA and pet travel. It could be, your local pet licensing, vaccination certificates. It could be, Maria and I and Melissa are in Southern California, so we have a lot of people that travel frequently to Mexico. And so there's a lot of things, whether they're getting on an airplane or driving or just, having a fun vacation and taking along their pets, that we really need to understand as people that work in the veterinary field. So we hope that you get a lot out of this presentation, and we are available for follow-up questions because we know we could talk for hours on this subject, as we often do. So we're going to try and focus it to really understand how everybody has an impact in pet travel.
So, yes, so just touching on what Leslie said about even if you are not offering travel services, it is very important that your documentation is accurate and compliant. And we're going to get into a lot of this and expand on this. But I want to share this quote from an article. Skiff is a travel industry publication online, and in their Megatrends 2025, they reported that Allianz Partners Annual Vacation Confidence was saying that you can see the numbers right there. Nearly a quarter of senior traveled and over 40% of middle-aged travelers are taking their pets with them. And so that market is expected to double in between 2023 and 2032. So whether or not you're trying to avoid it, it's happening. Um, so if you're not going to do the service, that's okay. But you can make it easier for the practice that will, because the USDA accredited veterinarians are still responsible in helping the patients do this. Oops, sorry.
Okay, so we've kind of laid out what we're gonna talk about, and we're gonna break this up into a few sections. So we're gonna talk through about rabies, the public health reason for these rabies laws. And interesting, Maria and I attended an AHA webinar, I don't, was it earlier this week or last week? I don't know, it was very recent. And Dr. Ford, who's like a vaccine expert, was giving this awesome discussion about just rabies in general. And it is amazing that every state has different rules and regulations, and there's still, I think almost half the states still don't require legally rabies vaccine, which just floored me. So it is a public health issue, and a lot of the reasons that we're going to discuss why there's regulations for travel have to do with protecting people, not the pets. It's people that they're worried about. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the new CDC regulations. If you're not familiar with that, we're going to get you up to speed on it because it's really important to know. And I'm going to walk you through some rabies certificates issues. And then we're going to look at other things like screening test, microchipping, the emphasis on protecting the pet health, because sometimes that gets left out. As I mentioned, travel requirements are due to public health and protecting people, but we're often forgetting how to protect the pet during travel. And then round trip care. So we have to know, okay, we get them to the destination, but how do they get back? There's new rules and regulations when it comes to returning to the US. And then we want you to think about travel services as wellness care. I'm sure that there may be hospitals on here that are emergency, critical care, specialty potentially, and they have we have nothing to do with that. But you'll find that yes, every veterinary practice has something to do with protecting pets. And can this be a valuable profit center? This is a presentation Maria and I have done in the past about how you can make this a profit center for your practices. And then we're going to give you some resources on where to find help.
Thank you. Let's get right into it. So as Leslie mentioned, we did that CE on rabies was quite interesting. So if you have an AHA Learning account, I saw it posted there. I definitely recommend that you subscribe to receive the AHA Learning CE. So they didn't ask me to do that. I am plugging it because it's a great resource for learning. But as was shared with us in that CE and as is posted on the CDC website, domestic dogs are responsible for more than 95% of the 70,000 human deaths each year. So the global world, everybody in the world was hoping to completely get that number down to 0 by 2030. And the numbers have actually been increasing. And most of these deaths are in other countries. So that is why it's important. That's why the United States is really taking a stance on this, because the number is going in the opposite direction. They're 5 years from their goal of 0, and the numbers are going up. So that's kind of a little bit of the why this is so important now. And so we have those statistics there. You can see rabies is still there, although it's considered controlled, almost eradicated in the dog population. you can see that just in 2022, there were 50 cases in dogs. And dogs being very close to people, that is the concern there. So I'm just going to go to the next, and we'll get into the CDC. This is a big thing, and this will affect everybody. So even if you're not doing travel services, this may land on your desk. The CDC requirements and so the rules were actually much more stringent until they were revised. So making allowances for our neighbors in Canada and Mexico primarily, but so they loosened them up a little bit. But as of July 31st, 2025, there is no more of that transition period where somebody could leave the country and return with an endorsed health certificate. So this is why it's become very relevant. So the United States is now imposing its own rules on the importation of pets, even if they originated from the United States, because to leave the country, you're meeting the requirements of that destination. And now the United States has its own rules for dogs returning to the country. And so I'm just emphasizing that specifically for dogs. So this is what they're looking at. High risk country, has the dog been to a high risk country in the last 6 months? What type of vaccine was given, US or foreign? Because currently a pet can travel with a foreign vaccine, but the United States has strict rules about returning, and they want really only US issued vaccinations. And then microchipping, the dog must be older than 6 months old, so no more puppies being able to travel. And there's this new dog import form that's required for all dogs re-entering the country. So we'll get into that as well.
And I'm just going to throw out Maria, because when we talk about how the regulations originally came out as very strict and then they were relaxed, that's really important to know, because I had patients traveling on August, right at the beginning of August of 2024. And we were trying to comply with those requirements to get the pets to be able to return. They were traveling to Canada, and they were in for their health certificate appointment on the morning of August 1st. And between the time that I sat down at my computer and I went and checked, about an hour later, they updated the regulations. So there was a lot of pressure put on the US to make the changes to allow easier movement back and forth between Canada and Mexico. That was one of the big reasons for the change. But it is still the first time that the US has put re-entry requirements for pets, or for, even scrutinizing pets coming in. It was a really big deal, because people were very used to just, hey, the US doesn't care. Just come on in, every pet. So it is a big deal, and we do have to pay attention to what that looks like.
That's absolutely. I remember when you called me and I said, just wait, somebody will figure out this isn't going to work. I remember that case.
Yeah.
So countries are broken down into two categories, high risk and low risk. And the CDC does have a list of these countries, but I'll make it very easy for you. Low risk, Canada and Mexico are in that. And the European countries, the EU countries, and pretty much any island country that is requiring a FAVN. So Japan or Taiwan. So it's a very, very short list. And then high risk is pretty much everybody else. So all of Asia, the Middle East, Africa, South America. So pretty much everybody else. But there is a list, and if you Google high risk, CDC high risk countries, it's very easy to find that list. So for both, must be 6 months or older, obviously healthy when they arrive. They must have a microchip. And I'm going to get into the details of the microchip, and they'll both, regardless of which type of country they're coming from, they need that CDC dog import form. And so let's get into the high risk countries, since really a lot of the destinations fall into that category. It is much more strict. So the United States did not used to care about whether the microchip was there or not, which order the microchip was given with the vaccine, and now it is functioning very closely to the destinations that do not have rabies or low prevalence of rabies and really not in their dog population. So you can see here. So now only the rabies after the microchip will be counted, and it's only good for 1 year. So you can think about all those adult dogs that we've been following a 3-year protocol for, but they didn't get that microchip. So once we get that microchip, we start all over. If there's been a lapse, that's not acceptable for the United States. Even though technically it's a dog is considered immunized regardless of a lapse in the United States, when it's coming from a high-risk rabies country, no lapses. So if they're going to be traveling, to a high risk, they cannot have any lapses. So if there's been a lapse, again, we start over with that initial, so like as if they're puppies. There's a 28-day waiting period before they can leave the United States, and if that is the situation, and that is becoming the key issue for a lot of people trying to leave the country, because they cannot leave the country until those 28 days have passed. And then needing the US endorsed certification of US issued rabies vaccination form before leaving the country as well. So that was part of the rules that sunsetted on July 31st before they could get these forms while they'd already been abroad, but not anymore. So you really need to, people traveling need to be prepared with this.
And I just had a pet go through this. In fact, he traveled to Brazil just a few weeks ago, and he could not postpone his travel whatsoever. He went to a veterinary hospital, got a rabies vaccine, but he had an avid microchip that they didn't even scan. So there was no record of the microchip on the rabies certificate. He had just had the rabies vaccine. And I'm like, we've got to do an ISO compliant microchip if you want this dog to ever be able to return. Well, if you want this dog to return in the next 3 years, but now this has become a primary vaccine. So it's basically, it can only return in the next year, or you're going to go through the extra steps that Maria's going to go through. And in the end, we weren't able to get a rabies certificate certified for easy return because he couldn't wait the 28 days before leaving the country. So we really have to know this, of what these rules are to help the clients not avoid these issues.
Exactly, because they may be, that's exactly it. They're going to a different practice before so we're all tied in together. So this is just in writing what I just said about the 28 days after the initial, or if there's a booster, 28 days after a booster if the previous has lapsed. This is from the CDC. Same thing with the microchip. So very strict about the microchipping being before the rabies vaccine. So just to think about that in your day-to-day protocols. A client comes, somebody's doing a rabies vaccine. Maybe we need to be thinking about offering that microchip earlier than we have traditionally been doing it. I think a lot of practices are doing it when they're getting spayed or neutered, but they're getting that first vaccine when they're, let's say, 16 weeks old. So this is what the form looks like, but it is not a form you really fill out by hand. It is generated directly in VHIX and submitted by the USDA accredited veterinarian. So you log in and you fill it out directly in there, but they do have a PDF version that you could look at to see what the required fields are. There is one critical piece of information that this form asks for, which tends to trip up a lot of practices, and it does ask for the lot expiration number. So that is a key thing that our PIMs don't really help us keep track of. So that should be in your medical record, part of your medical record when a vaccine is given. But this has been, I have seen practices have issues because that information was not available to them. It was not notated.
And we're going to talk about that in
And
great
we will
detail.
talk about that. And then the CDC dog import form, this is generated and submitted online by your client. So you don't have to do anything. They can do this even after they have traveled. But they will need a copy of it in order to re-enter the United States. And I will leave it to Leslie now.
Okay, rabies certificates. Okay. My curse, my bane, and yeah, I talk about rabies certificates all day. My other admin people are like, oh gosh, she's looking at a rabies certificate again. So, and Melissa's heard me do this too. So this is the base certificate form, what you're seeing here, the NASPHV Form 51, that almost all the PIM system or your practice management software systems have based their rabies certificate on. And if complete, it's generally pretty good if all of the areas are complete. However, as Maria just mentioned, the lot expiration is not on this form, which is hence why a lot of PIMs do not have an easy way to track the lot expiration. They are, as updates come out, I am seeing more that have this capability, but I've also seen where somehow it's not being updated and I'll get a rabies certificate that the expiration of the vaccine that they gave the pet is actually before the vaccine was given, right? So something's not updating. And that's something we're going to talk about here in just a second as I kind of move through the rest of these slides. Okay, so Maria was shocked because she thought I made this rabies certificate for this presentation. She thought that I just generated this. I want you guys to put your eagle eyes on the certificate. You can take a minute or so to look at it because we're going to call out the need for corrections on this certificate. So this is where when I have a process where my staff members gather the information before it gets back to me to talk to anybody about travel. And of course, I want the last two rabies certificates, give them to me. And this was a rabies certificate I got on Monday. And what do you guys see?
Let's put it in the chat. We'll give
throw
them.
it in the chat. You have a minute or
let's
two.
do 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah.
And put in the chat what your thoughts are.
What are your thoughts?
What did you catch? How many errors or
yeah. So eagle eyes, eagle eyes. There's one that's kind of a trick, but we'll get to that too. Or it gets a trick.
And you got this certificate for a patient who was hoping to travel.
Hoping to travel, and somebody mentioned the clinic info. I have taken the clinic info off. It was there, so that their address, their phone number, their clinic name, all of that was there. But I had to remove it to protect the guilty.
When Leslie told me that, I actually thought she made this up for this presentation. So
let me ask a quick question that was thrown into the chat that applies specifically to this rather than it says rabies lot info does not need to be on the rabies certificate, but it is needed as a requirement for CD high risk form. That's like the question mark. So like that's your question basically.
Yes and no, because there's lots of countries, lots of places that you're traveling to that is a requirement. And there's even the same lot expiration for the core vaccines or the other travel vaccines, like all of that information. And I'm going to get into a story about that in just a moment. I'll make sure I don't forget because this really impacted a client's ability to travel in a minute. So we should be documenting all of the information that's on those stickers some way. And of course, I'm sure the majority of you on this call are using electronic medical records. We can't stick a sticker into that electronic record, so there has to be a way to capture that information. All right, so.
Do you want me to read you the answers?
No, I kind of saw what was coming through. So here's the first thing. The product name, and this is something I see in about 90% of rabies certificates. And let me just preface this by, I don't throw any hospital under the bus. What I will say is, hey, do you know what the purpose of a rabies certificate is in the United States? It's to issue your pet, generally a pet license for a dog, or some places do require them for cats. So they're generating a certificate just so you can get licensed, your pet licensed. But for the purposes of travel, we have to have some additional documentation. So I don't throw anyone under the bus, but in my head, I'm going, come on, people, get your rabies certificate act together. So the product name is not vaccine rabies. Okay, this is a Merck vaccine. Could it be Novavax? Could it be Rabvac? Could it be Imrab? Right? There is a product name. And just so you know that Merck probably makes a dozen, if not more, rabies vaccines. They might have a Novavax 1 or a Novavax 3 or a Rabvac, whatever. So there's also like different states have different requirements. Like only California has a very stringent list of vaccines that are acceptable, but vaccine manufacturers make all kinds. So this is not appropriate, but I see it very consistently. And I'll see a lot of rabies certificates that only have the manufacturer, and maybe it's abbreviated down, like Merck might be MERK, like it's not completely spelled out, or, you know, people are still using BI because who wants to spell Boehringer Ingelheim, right? But that's okay, but it has to have the product name with it as well. And this is absolutely a requirement on almost every place that we're traveling, that information. In fact, I can't even think of a place that doesn't require both things. So
Yeah.
you've got to have that. So go ahead, Maria, hit us with the next one. Okay. So the dose listed as the initial dose. So a primary vaccine, in fact, we learned this from Dr. Ford. Primary, it doesn't necessarily mean the first, it means it's priming the immune system, which I thought was interesting because I never knew that. So the initial dose, or the primary dose, is always going to be 1 year. So we're already seeing this as a 3-year expiration, and it's listed as the initial dose. So what is it? Is it 1 year? Is it 3-year? I don't know. There's a conflict here. Okay, what's next, Maria? Okay, microchip number, you guys all caught that. So it says not listed. This pet had a microchip. It wasn't scanned. And this is also very common. And we're going to talk about microchip protocols. Anytime we give a rabies vaccine, we must determine if they have a microchip in place because of all of these new regulations. And it should be a standard for all hospitals. And I'm getting on my high horse, right, my soapbox. But really, we need to establish that we are scanning pets. Microchip scanners are not that expensive. We have one in every one of our 7 exam rooms, plus the treatment room has 4 or 5. Like, we have scanners all over the place. We do have a protocol, which we'll talk about. Okay, so that was a big problem with this one. Okay, Maria. Color, you guys caught that. Okay, not listed. I don't care if you call it cream or tan or whatever, give it a color. Like, that should be part of a basic pet signalment. The descriptor of the pet is really important. And it is part of a good medical record, right? You should have this no matter what. So when we talk about some of these issues, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? So if we don't have good protocols in place to make sure our team is capturing all of the information on a pet when they put them into our practice management software, then it's not going to populate the information on the certificate. Okay, we're at 4. Go for it, Maria. What's next? The date of birth. So this is the trick one. You guys don't know this, but this pet was born in 2018. And when I pointed this out to the pet owner, she's like, what? Where did they get that birth date? And I'm like, I don't know. I go, but our birth date has to match. It has to match all of your other information. And, you know, we're going to have to get that birth date corrected because it does all have to align. So again, garbage in, garbage out. Was it the pet owner's problem? Like, did this husband give the wrong birth date? I don't know. But one of the things I do is we preliminary put the pet in the system, and then we take a look at the medical records, and I will put birth date mismatch, birth date mismatch. These documents have, sometimes I get 4 or 5 birth dates across documents. They all have to align if we're going to use them. Okay, what's next, Maria? We're not done.
We're not.
Signature. Okay, it is not valid without a veterinarian signature on here. I don't care if it's digital. The only place that cares is Hawaii. And some pet travel people will ask for wet signatures for EU countries, but there's nothing to actually prove that. But it's got to have something there. Scribble, stamp, I don't know, but give us a signature because it's not valid without it. Okay, what's the last one? This, I can call out my practice. I only added the doctor's license number to our rabies certificates probably about 8 or 9 years ago, because it wasn't part of the PIMS to put it there. The standard rabies certificate didn't include it. And I was like, how did I miss that? Right. So some, especially if you've had the software for a while, it might not be pulling that into your rabies certificate. But one of the things that I hear when we call, because my staff are really good, I'm like, hey, can you guys get me a corrected rabies certificate? And they'll call back a hospital and they'll say, hey, we got it, we're trying to help your client travel. We need to make these corrections to the rabies certificate. And they'll say, no, we can't do that. Our software doesn't allow it. We can't make that change. And I'm like, okay, there's tech support, 1-800 call your PIMS, and there has to be a way to get this corrected. Now, if they can't, there is an out, and I'll share that here in just a second. I think I have a slide on it. But there was 7 corrections needed, and this is not unrealistic. I have seen them with more. And I see this regularly. If I get a good rabies certificate, I'm shocked. I'm elated. I'm like, woohoo, somebody is doing the right thing here. This is super common. And we got to do better as a profession because it is a legal document. It is a legal document. So we just get used to it. And this is where we were talking about, is it the veterinarian's problem? No, because it's really a management software issue. It's something that we just don't have our ducks in a row of making sure that what we're producing and handing to the client is accurate. So I've experienced this with somebody forgot to switch or change the lot number, or we had some sort of issue or concern. But remember that ultimately somebody's got to be making sure that the documents are corrected and then have a way to fix it for clients if they need to get it fixed. So this is a real issue. Okay, Maria, head to the next one here. All right. This is my little dog, Zoe. She's now 10 plus years here. This is our current, the PIMS we use is Impromed, which was one at the time, one of the big 3, Avamot, Cornerstone, and Impromed used to have the market on PIMS. Now it's, the wild, wild west. We've got a million of them. But Impromed did not make this certificate. The base certificate stinks. Maria uses Impromed as well, and we've had this conversation. So I had to create this on my own many years ago when I've been at this practice almost 20 years. And I've added the lot expiration on here because Impromed does not consider that part of the rabies information. So I actually had to create a database field and do some things to get it to look like this. But one of the things I just want to point out is at the bottom of the rabies certificate, when it says, I hereby certify, this is the veterinarian, it's a digital signature. I vaccinated this animal in accordance with the company's recommendation for the vaccine used on the above date. About a year ago, I added in microchip was scanned and verified prior to vaccine. And this is to mimic the CDC rabies certificate, which I'm going to show you, which is my out for hospitals that absolutely say they can't make a correction. You can fill out that CDC rabies form, a rabies certificate. This is it, and give it to the client. And, you just have to fill out every box, right? You can't leave anything blank. This form is available online. You just do CVC rabies form. It's there. It's a fillable PDF. Doctors just got to sign it or stamp it or endorse it digitally, whatever. But don't tell a client you can't give them a good rabies certificate. And I know none of you guys are doing that, right? I'm preaching to the choir, preaching to the choir. But this is an issue that we see. So there's lots of resources for rabies. You can go to that, Maria. Remember, although we get concerned, we don't want animals with rabies, it is to protect people. This is a zoonotic deadly disease that there is no cure for. There's the one person that may have lived one time who has horrible neurological disease, but this is not a curable disease. And that is why rabies is, the thing that any travel is like the base requirement. I lay it out to the client. Microchipping, rabies vaccine, healthy, fit to fly exam. Like that's the basic things, but there's more to it depending on where they're going.
That's right. So yeah, so there's a lot of resources. So when it comes to public health, the CDC, they have a lot of great resources for veterinarians as well, and they do a good job of providing instruction forums. The rabies compendium. So this is the last one I believe was in 2016, but this is where the National Association of the State Health Veterinarians have agreed on some guidelines. Rabiesaware.org is a great resource, so I would definitely bookmark that. It also will provide you with the information to your state public health veterinarian, and they are the ones who do a lot of determination with respect to rabies, and that is because it is zoonotic. So the state public health veterinarian is the one that bridges those kinds of diseases, the part of the One Health. So bookmark this. Lots of great information on that website. And you can thank BI for that. They do take care of that. So some good resources there. All right, so we can, before we move on, we'll move on. We've got a lot of things to cover.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So again, we wanted to talk to hospitals who say that travel is not part of, one, you could be doing travel or a little bit of travel or a lot of travel. But if you're not doing any travel, there's still travel screening tests that need to happen for pets. We are going to talk about one that really shouldn't be done by veterinarians who are not going to follow the pet through the process unless there's like a reason, like the client just is moving before they finish travel. But there's definitely some considerations there. Pets should be, they have to be free of parasites to travel. They have to be in good health. And so our annual recommendations for wellness tests for pets should be part of all pets' medical records, right? We should see, if you're in a tick-borne disease area, a heartworm area, annual fecal tests, like pets should have this test because otherwise they're going to come to the veterinarian who's taking care of their travel and we're going to go, hey, we still recommend all of these tests to make sure that your pet is healthy and able to travel safely because we're not just worried about parasites going where you're, the place that doesn't want parasites to come in. We want you to be protected as a patient. And then microchip protocols matter. Maria, we're going to talk about that later. So I think, are we talking about it now?
No, we'll talk about it.
Okay. You want to talk about it now?
Sure.
Okay. So
yes. So let me jump to
you jump. Okay.
So this is that screening test. The rabies serology is for travel only. So this text is just pulled from Kansas State Laboratory and from rabiesaware.org. It is not telling you anything more than that patient has been vaccinated and is responding to an immunization. So clients that are trying to do this as a titer test to warrant immunity levels, that is not what it is. It is for travel only. And really, it is more intricate than it would seem. So it's not just let's send the FABin out. There are rules concerning when a sample should be drawn relative to the rabies. So if you are not familiar with the travel requirements and your client is just coming to you and saying, can you do the FABin? To better protect yourself and in the best interest of the client, you should respectfully decline because what are the rules associated with that travel destination with respect to drawing that sample? And this is not, once it goes out with a microchip on there, If it's wrong, if it was drawn too early, we can't do anything about it. It's not a cheap test. So I just want to stress that really it is part of travel and knowing the rules associated with it.
And there are countries that require that the name on that FAVN match to the passport. And we have like had these sad
Yes.
conversations with clients all the time because, they might use Charlie in the US, but whatever their actual name on their passport doesn't
Yes.
match. And now we've got a FAVN that potentially is going to prevent their pet from traveling because the the hospital that did this FAVN test did not understand the requirements, and there's
Yeah.
just been so many issues with this. And we hate
Yeah.
having to tell clients that we're going to have to repeat this expensive test or it's going to delay their travel.
And usually it takes a while to get the sample back, and destinations that are requiring this test generally have also waiting periods. So to mess up at this step really could delay the situation. And I will touch on Australia. If your veterinarian does not have a USDA accreditation, Australia requires, for example, that this test be done by a USDA accredited veterinarian. So again, that's another rule that just comes to mind. So let's get into microchipping because that's a big part of this whole component. So what's an ISO compliant microchip? It has 15 or 16 digits. It's a frequency that can be read by universal scanners. So it's a standard that is issued for those microchips. So most countries require an ISO compliant microchip. And I know that Avid now has them. They did not a long time ago. And then pretty much everybody is adhering to that standard. But what you're looking for is a 15 to 16 digit microchip number. And so what do you do if a pet has an ISO compliant microchip? The easy answer is to rechip the pet. Now, rules, destinations differ. So they may accept a rabies that was done under a non-ISO compliant microchip, but we don't know all the rules. They can change per destination. So the safe answer is to put in a second microchip and just call it a day at that. So otherwise, most destinations, if they don't have an ISO compliant microchip, the client has to travel with their own reader. So that's sometimes a carve out, but microchips are pretty cheap compared to a microchip scanner. So,
But you cannot get a return to the US rabies certification without an ISO compliant chip in place. There's no carve out for traveling with the scanner, and it doesn't allow them. It doesn't allow them to return. And again, like my pet or the pet that went to Brazil, it had a non-ISO compliant chip.
That's right.
And we still had to implant a new one, but the US doesn't care that it had a non-ISO compliant chip beforehand. So it's really important that I don't know who's using those anymore. I tend to find shelters and rescue groups and things. Maybe they like stockpile them, but nobody should be doing non-ISO compliant chips. And I don't see very many being implanted, but they are out there. We're still getting them.
Yes. Okay. And then I'll have Leslie talk about, the protocols. We kind of touched on it, but it's really important. The importance of these microchips means that we have to have a protocol in place for our team members.
And we've been doing, our practice has been specializing in travel for such a long time that we've built these things into place. So we have in our PIMS database, microchip number 1, microchip number 2, what type is 1, what type is 2, is it registered? Like we have all of that built into our PIMS because we want to make sure that we are staying on top of microchips. We recommend microchips at the get-go during the puppy and kitten visits. We recommend microchips for any non-microchip pet at every visit. If they're not chipped, they have to decline it. It's built into our medical record. It's documented. We scan that pet every single visit because maybe the first time we scanned it, didn't have a chip. They declined to get one. They come back a year later and maybe they've had a chip put in the meantime. So we always scan every visit. Our doctor's assistants, it is part of their template that they ask all the questions and scan the microchip, very last thing. And they'll either say it's correct what we have in the database or no chip found today. So it's a conversation we have with every client, and we explain why it should be happening. You know, people think, and we have this conversation with them, I'm never going to travel with my pet ever. Well, your kids grow up and they want to travel with the pet, you know, like you never know what this pet's lifestyle is going to be for sure. And they can certainly opt out of it. And it's true, there's backyard, you know, barn dogs or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still something where we should be having the conversation. We're doing a disservice to clients, especially if they come in and they say, I'm going to be traveling soon. And then we just give the rabies vaccine and we don't check on their microchip status. We're doing a disservice to that client. And I get the client's first question to me always is it going to hurt my pet to have another rabies vaccine? He just had one last month. And I said, well, it's not ideal, but as long as your pet's not allergic, as long as your pet doesn't have an immune disease, like that's a conversation with you and the doctor. But when you're going to travel, you have to follow the travel rules. I'm sorry that, you know, this wasn't discussed with you, but this is what you have to do now. So just have that conversation and build microchip protocols into place. No matter how you do it, just be doing something. It's better than what we see now. I get so many rabies certificates with no chip information. And the client's like, yeah, he's had a chip. He's had a chip since he was little. Well, they didn't scan him. Oh, you've been going there for 4 years? Well, it's not in the medical records. They've never scanned him. So that shouldn't be happening. We look like, you know, kind of knuckleheads as a profession when we're not taking the pet's whole picture into place. So that's the end of my soapbox on microchips.
No, I agree. And if you've ever lost a pet, you know, there's just I had a puppy 2 days in, crawled right out